What's going on, everybody? We are back and we are live. Mike and Matt from New York Sports Rehab, and today is a good day. The New York Mets, you've probably seen the news if you're a baseball fan, if you're a Mets fan, or if you're just a sports fan in general, you've definitely seen the speculation building up to today in which, Max Scherzer, 37 years old, still on top of his game. In fact, last season he had the lowest ERA of his career. And there was speculation yesterday that kind of came up out of the blue the past couple of days that he could be linked to the Mets, that he could actually be headed to Queens. And Uncle Steve gets it done. It seems like it was about this time last year, or actually not this time last year, but it was, just a year ago or some change where we were talking about this guy coming in, buying the team and putting his money where his mouth is. And here we are, Max Scherzer, 3-year, $130 deal to sign with the Mets. I know last night we were excited. We were actually saying, if it happened by 11 or midnight, we would go live and we would do this, as soon as the news broke. That ended up not being the case. And I ended up actually staying up till about 3 a.m. just kind of thinking, all right, well, midnight on the West Coast is about 3 a.m. That could be when the news breaks. But obviously didn't get anything yesterday. Come around 1 o'clock today, we find out that he indeed, in fact, is signing with the New York Mets over some suitors, the Dodgers, the Angels, some West Coast teams. And, as a Mets fan, couldn't be happier. There's a lot of different things. Obviously, you're getting a star pitcher, a guy that could be a number one on any other team in the league. But there are a couple different things that this has to factor into that we'll, discuss as we go on the next 20 or so minutes. So, Dad, with that being said, your initial thoughts and reaction to not only the signing today, but kind of the buildup of yesterday and yesterday evening in particular.
Initial thoughts going back to the end of last season. If you were to give me a list of every available free agent in this year's class, there's probably well over 100. There's a good chance I would have probably picked Max Scherzer as the least likely player to join the Mets out of all those players. He was pretty vocal about the fact he didn't want to play for the Mets during the trade deadline last year. A lot of that had to do with wanting to play on the West Coast and wanting to play for a team that had a chance to go to the World Series. But you never really got the impression that he had any interest whatsoever in playing in New York and playing for the Mets, and that would carry over into next season as well. So he would have been, if you asked me to pick one guy I would expect never to play for the Mets, he would have been the guy. So you could imagine the fact that he has signed now for that 3-year, $130 million contract. It's a shock in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it shows you, and it's made a point, if we're going to talk about all the intangibles, first and foremost, players will play in New York if they're cut from the right type of mold, and I believe Scherzer is. He's a bulldog.
Absolutely.
He's competitive. He's been on the big stage before. He's played in Washington. They won the World Series in 2019. And plus the fact that you threw a lot of money at him, a record-breaking deal, I believe comes out to 43.2 or 43.3 million per year. It completely breaks the record previously for pay per season of Garrett Cole, who I believe was at, I think, 36 point something million. Mm-hmm. So 43.2, 43.3 establishes a new criteria that we say now will never be broken, but who knows, in a couple of years we could be talking about other players who are making over 50. But yeah, total shock. Would have not expected it, except up until the last 2 or 3 days where we started hearing those rumors. But I want to personally thank Steven Matz. I want to thank Steven Matz's agent. I don't know his name. It may just be a coincidence, but from that moment on, when Matz and his agent spurned the Mets and evidently angered our owner, Steve Cohen, which was publicized on Twitter by his statements, ever since that day, the Mets went from doing absolutely nothing to just off the charts spending and improving their team. And overshadowed now in this whole thing is the Mets have brought in 3 other players, all 32 years old, but still in their prime, all cut from the same type of mold. High character guys. They're well respected and liked by their peers. And fellow teammates, as witnessed on Twitter as well. Escobar is going to go a long way as far as leadership in the clubhouse, along with Scherzer. Then you got Marte, who the Mets have been searching for years, or have been trying to sign for years. They finally have a bona fide, legitimate center fielder, and allowed Nimmo to slide over to one of the corner spots. And then you got Marcana, who I'm not that familiar, but what I read about him is, again, he's a hard-nosed type of player, high on-base percentage type of guy. Again, well-respected, well-liked. So all those players combined, along with Scherzer, just completely changes the culture of the team, the mindset that players don't want to play in New York. And so I want to thank Steven Matz and his agent, because all this took place after our owner, Steve Cohen, was angered by their so-called breaking the deal. Now, the last thing I'll say for now, as far as what this does for the team in general, Scherzer hopefully will stay healthy, and he'll make 30 or 32 starts next year. And that will go a long way, combined with DeGrom and giving us a great 1-2 punch, and especially if we make the postseason. But you got to look beyond that as far as what you're getting for bang for your buck with the money. The Mets clearly needed leadership on the team. Players have come out like Jeff McNeil and J.D. Davis at the end of the season and hinted about the fact that this team was in dire need of someone in that locker room to take control and keep guys in line and tell people the way things need to be. You're going to get that with Scherzer. So he may only play 1 out of every 5 days, 6 or 7 innings, but you're going to get 6 months worth of valuable leadership from him. And maybe Scherzer, or a guy like Scherzer, could have been the difference last year of the Mets continuing on and winning the division, or folding because they really kind of, just a lot of chaos and confusion and lack of leadership. So that goes a long way. That's what you're getting for your $130 million as well. A guy that's not going to take, pardon my language, a guy that's not going to take shit. He's going to get in players' faces if need be. He's going to provide leadership by example. But at the same token, DeGrom is a bulldog on the mound. And he's an example of intensity when he's on the mound, but he's just not that type of person that when, behind the scenes in the clubhouse is going to take people aside and tell them the way things need to be and how you need to act professionally. And don't underestimate that, because that could have been the difference last year of winning the division or basically falling apart. So he brings you that well-needed leadership, that change in culture, and also hopefully will set the tone now for years to come as far as New York, not being a place you want to go to for whatever reason. Now you got Scherzer there. That could lead to other free agents, not so much signing this year, but in years to come, and maybe after Scherzer's gone, especially if we obtain success. So there's so much more you're getting here than just those 30 or 32 starts for the next 2 or 3 years. It's a whole culture change. It's a whole change in leadership, and it's a change, hopefully, in bringing more players to our organization in years to come. So obviously, I love the deal.
Yeah. And, not to get in too much about, what the Yankees are doing this offseason, but this almost feels like a passing of the torch moment. At least all of my, my sports fandom, 20-something years now. And I know probably as well for a large portion of yours, the Mets have always been almost viewed upon as the little brother of the Yankees. Their star player, and he's available. The Mets are an afterthought. The Yankees, though, they could really get this guy. Cashman could really go Steinbrenner, Cashman. One of these guys are going to go out and shell out the money. Well, here we are, richest owner in baseball. Not only the richest owner in baseball, but he's the richest owner in baseball by double. The next richest owner in baseball has half of the amount of money that Steve Cohen has. And it just so happens to be that in baseball, there's no salary cap. There's no money doesn't mean a thing in terms of how you can build your roster and how much you can give a particular player here and a particular player there. And you hit the nail right on the head. The leadership that Scherzer brings, I mean, I don't mean to get it too ahead of myself. Obviously, 162-game season, you have to stay healthy. But all I can think of, and obviously there's some moves to be made, whether it's the middle of the infield, whether it's, more depth at pitching. But all I can think about is a 1-2 punch in a playoff series with Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. think any 29 other teams in all of baseball have anything that even merely comes close to that. If they can get to that point, that gives them such an advantage. Max Scherzer, like I said, 37 years old, but coming off of arguably his best season ever in the pros. The guy's got the nickname Mad Max. You see how he methodically works on the mound. He pitches angry. He plays angry. And he's going to, exactly like you said, lead this team that is still particularly young in a lot of levels, especially now with Conforto likely gone. I want to say he was the last member of the Mets that was actually on that 2015 World Series team. Yeah, Syndergaard and Conforto, they're both gone. So not only do you get the presence of a guy that is as good as Scherzer, but you got a guy with not only World Series but playoff experience. You got a guy 37 years. I mean, if his elbow and his shoulder and his wrist are healthy, it doesn't matter if he's 50, 60 years old. The guy's going to go out there and he's going to dominate every fifth day. You got to hope that. Not only is this big for the Mets organization, but in particular, it's big for DeGrom. I was listening to a Spaces last night, a Twitter Spaces, and there were some very good points. And one person in particular said it almost seemed last season that the rotation was in such shambles that DeGrom was almost like a stopgap. Every fifth day, DeGrom had to do everything he had to do to get this team a win because we're not sure what we're getting the 4 days after that. And I think in large part that stress on not only his body but his, mental side of things could have largely been the reason and why we, the last 2 months, 3 months of the season, we didn't get any DeGrom. And then when we did, it was a shortened effort. And, the guy still would go 3-4 innings, come out early. But now you're thinking, okay, back-to-back days. You don't know what they're going to do in regards to Stroman, or I know they've already looked at a couple other free agent arms, veteran arms to kind of pivot to, but we're not exactly, as of right now, not sure how that's going to go. We might not know in 24 hours. And if we don't know in 24 hours, there's a large chance that we're going to go a long period of time without knowing exactly what direction this team will shape up in, just due to the lockout and how that, goes as a whole. Moving on with the other signings, Marte, you said it great. He finally got a center fielder. I don't think in all of my, Mets fandom, I can't remember the last time we had an everyday center fielder that everyone was, not only confident in, but sold on. I'm used to the days of, Lagares, not a knock on Lagares, one of the best defensive players I've seen in baseball, but you got a guy now who's going to defend. He's going to hit. He's going to have speed. He's going to, have the ability to run the bases at a above average level. And not looking ahead too much again, but if you get Javier Baez back, or if we can solidify that second base position, look at that, middle infield. Look at that middle defense that you're looking at of Lindor, possibly Baez, and then Marte in center field. Obviously, the veteran addition of Escobar and I'm going to botch the name, Kana. And it's going to provide not only depth. I think they're definitely upgrades from your VR and PR. But, you don't know exactly what you're going to receive in terms of, are you getting a Javier Baez back implemented in that lineup? Are you possibly going to get, there were some talks that they could be looking at Trevor Story, but I think with the Scherzer deal done now, that's probably out of the window. I know Corey Seager just signed for something like 7 years or 10 years, 340 something, just under that Lindor mark with the Texas Rangers. So the team obviously could go pivot and a multitude of different directions, but I think they're set up right now in the best position they've been set up in early, not even December yet, late November, early December. And what's crazy to think about is just 11 days ago, this team did not have a general manager. They did not have a manager. We didn't know what was going on. And it was almost like, all right, we're going into the winter meetings with Sandy Alderson, the guy that falls asleep at 8 o'clock. How are we going to get things done? What's this midnight wire going to be like? And then you get a guy like Billy Epler in here. And it just has seemed like these last 10 days, specifically, as you mentioned, after the spurning of Matz and his agent, that, the shit has hit the fan and they're full speed, full throttle towards one direction, and that's spending money to make the New York Mets a better team. And, you can argue it's too much money, he's too old, Well, I disagree. And at the end of the day, especially from a sports fan's perspective, it's not our money. It's Steve Cohen's money. He made a lot of it. He's got a lot more left. Him giving Max Scherzer $130 million over 3 years is like me putting $10 in the bank and hoping that I see it again in 3 years. I mean, the guy's made of money. I don't think this is even a dent or a anything in his pocket. So why not? Why not do it? Make the team better, make the rotation better. This team needed depth, it needed leadership, and they get both with not only a pitcher that is very good, but one of the best of all time in Max Scherzer, a true competitor and a guy that you said earlier, I think he is going to love playing in Queens. I think he's going to love the spotlight of New York, and I think he's the type of guy. He's not going to fold. He's not going to crumble. It's only going to make him better, and he's really going to go out there every fifth day, and he's going to compete and make the Mets, a much better team when he's on the mound and when they're in the clubhouse.
Are you there?
Yeah. Did you lose me?
No, I'm right here.
Okay.
Are you ready for me to talk?
Yeah, I was going to pivot on to you.
All right, passing it back on to me. A couple of points I want to make as far as talking about where I think the Mets go from here. I think, they will make an attempt to sign Javier Baez because he's got a good relationship with our owner, Steve Cohen, and he's also best friends with Lindor. If they don't get Baez, I don't believe they'll go after any other. I think he is the last high-ticket, high-priced free agent that they'll go after this year. I would like to see them, and this may not happen till later on after the lockout, but I really like to see them address the bullpen because these guys are great, but even last year, as dominating as DeGrom was before he got hurt, he was averaging between 5 and 6 innings a start. Scherzer, I don't know what it was, but I bet it was probably no more than 6 or so. That seems to be the norm these days. So you're going to need on a daily basis, probably even with those guys, maybe a good 3 innings out of your bullpen on a daily basis. We lost Loop, who was valuable last year. We're probably losing Familia, and I know a lot of people are kind of like, he can go, who cares? He had a fairly decent year last year. If you look at him not as a closer or a setup man, but more like a middle guy, he was pretty valuable. So you're going to have to replenish the bullpen a little bit. I would love to see them bring in, if they're going to spend some money, I'd love to see them bring in Kimbrel next year. So right now, we're looking at those high price guys, but as we go forward down the road, I really would love to see the Mets bring in 2 or 3 bona fide relief pitchers, maybe guys that have experience in the closer role before, because starters don't go 9 anymore. So it's great you've got DeGrom and you've got and Scherzer now, but who do you got in the 7th and 8th and maybe the 6th inning, before that, the 8th inning, whatever the case may be. So I hope they pursue the bullpen. I hope they're serious about it. And to some degree, I'm more concerned about that at this point than signing Baez. Baez would be nice. Baez is more like a luxury at this point. We got enough guys. You can go with McNeil. You got Cano coming back. I know that's not exciting, but he's still on the team and he played well the last time he did play for the Mets. You've got J.D. Davis. Right now, no one's been traded yet. So with what you've got pieces to work around there. Whereas with the bullpen, if we don't address that bullpen, if you just let that go and just bring in a couple of pieces in spring training off the scrap heap, more or less, that could come back and bite you what later on. So to me, from where we go from here, I'd like to see the Mets really fortify that bullpen and maybe address a guy like, a top end type of reliever, maybe a little bit on the downside of his career like Kimbrel, but still can come in the 7th, 8th inning and give, that solid performance every day. And if Diaz happens to falter, he's in the wings as your closer. So don't underestimate what you need in the bullpen. I wouldn't mind them bringing in another, at least back end of the rotation guy. I'm okay with them bringing back Rich Hill. I liked him. Yeah. He did everything you could have expected last year. He gave you 5 innings every time out. He was consistent. He was durable. You bring him in and let him compete for the back end of the rotation next year with Tyler McGill and David Peterson. And if he doesn't win the role, either he's in the minor leagues for you as depth, or he provides long relief. So I'm okay with that as well. I think you need to bring in a back end of the rotation guy. Don't be afraid to bring in guys that may not make the team that are going to be in the minors, because in these days, you need more than a 5-man starting rotation.
Mm-hmm.
The more pitching, the better. So I believe that if they don't get Baez, that will be the last premier type of player they're looking for. But I'm hoping they address the bullpen. And if they do go anywhere as far as somewhat semi-premier, I hope they go along the lines of a Kimbrel or a top-end reliever. Last thing I'll leave you with as far as the future goes for me also is we haven't really discussed manager. And this move, I don't know if you've realized this now, but this move with Scherzer really will impact who the next manager is going to be. This team is set to win now. Scherzer's going to be here 2-3 years. DeGrom is 34, and he's in an opt-out year after this one. Who knows what happens? This team is not building for the future. This team is building for now. They need to make the playoffs this year. They need to go deep into the playoffs by next year, and hopefully in the next 3 or 4 years win a World Series. So they need to bring in a veteran manager. Bringing in a Luis Rojas type or a guy that's well-respected in the minor leagues and has never managed before, I don't think that's going to cut it with this team. I think now with the addition of all 3 veterans, that we obtained last Friday, and now Scherzer, this is a veteran team ready and willing and able to win right now.
Yeah.
So it would not shock me if you see a Buck Showalter get another shot. I'm sure Scherzer will have a say, or they may have already spoken to him about a manager. But this could be an opportunity for a Buck Showalter to get one more chance. You've heard about Brad Osmus, who has a prior relationship with our general manager, Billy Epler. But I would be shocked if they bring someone in who's a first-time manager, has only managed in the minor leagues before, that Luis Rojas type of guy. I think we're looking at a veteran manager with a veteran coaching staff that has been there and done that before, maybe been to the playoffs, maybe been to the World Series. So, that mindset has changed, because in the past, and I was still an advocate of Carlos Beltran, but I don't see that happening now.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll come back in a coaching capacity, but this team is a veteran team with guys in their 30s, mid-30s, upper 30s. They're looking to win now. You just can't throw a guy in who's never managed before and put him in front of this team, more or less, and expect them in the next year or two to win a world championship. So I'm looking for a seasoned veteran manager and someone who's been there, done that before, like a Buck Showalter. And hopefully we'll be looking back on this Scherzer move someday as a historical move. And being an older guy like me, I hope I can compare this move to one, Gary Carter being signed by the Mets in 1985. And guess what? In 86, we won a world championship. Mike Piazza signed by the Mets in, I think, 98 or 99. Guess what? In 2000, we went to the World Series against the Yankees. And even Pedro Martinez, who was signed by the Mets in 2005. And of course, in 2006, the Mets went to the NLCS. They lost Game 7, but they still were a team that won a division. They went deep into the playoffs, very well-respected team. Hopefully, we'll put Scherzer in that same category someday, and we'll be talking about how he came on in 2021. And, excuse me, we at least competed and went deep into a playoff round or a world championship in that time. Yeah. So I think and I hope that this will be an historical move for the Mets that we'll talk about from years to come.
Yeah, I hope so too. Likewise, and referring back to what you said about the back of the end rotation, I think Rich Hill, perfect candidate to come back, join this team, and join this pitching staff. You mentioned it, 5-6 innings every time out. You know what you're going to get, consistency. And then in terms of the open manager position, obviously, Buck Showalter, would be a great fit. I wish that this move, you can say in hindsight 2020, you wish this move was made earlier, because I think a guy, especially with the emergence of, 2A signing and Max Scherzer, I think Bob Melvin would have been a great fit with this team. And I think that, he would have, played that position or played that role accordingly. Last thing I want to ask you, let's say, all right, $43 million to Scherzer annually. Let's say Jacob deGrom goes out there and he has a whole 32 game sample size, and he gives us the same effectiveness as he did last year when he was healthy. Does he get $50 million annually the next year?
Well, if you want to keep him, you're probably going to have to at least match, if not exceed. You're paying a 37-year-old pitcher who hasn't been in your organization, 43. So, he could be that 50 million guy we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be comfortable more than anything if DeGrom. I don't expect DeGrom to be quite as dominant as he was last year. I'll take the DeGrom from the year or the 2 years before that. But more importantly, if he's healthy the whole year. I want to see DeGrom go out and not miss any starts unless it's just for maintenance day here and there. I'll feel comfortable if we can go back and say, yeah, for whatever reason, that was just a fluke that year. His problems health-wise are behind him. He's got great mechanics. He's not overly muscular. So I feel confident now that he's healthy and he can give me 3, 4, 5 more years. So I want to see a very good DeGrom, but more so I need to be convinced that his health issues are mainly behind him. If they are, I want him back. And, yeah, you're going to have to pay him. The good thing about DeGrom is, and again, I don't know for sure, he seems like the kind of guy, he's always kind of like that just average kind of guy, simple man, as they call him sometimes, So I don't think you're going to have to. I guess you will be breaking the bank, but I don't think it's going to be to the point of where, he's going to ask for, the moon, the stars, and everything else, and we're going to go 50, 60 million dollars. He may be fine with just matching what Scherzer or going $1 million above it, as opposed to going 55 or 60. I don't think he's that type of person to that extent. I could be wrong, just guessing. But he'll definitely have to at least match it and beat it. And I'll make that. If I'm making that decision, I need to see almost a full year out of DeGrom as far as health-wise. It may mean maybe extending him late next season. If he's healthy and durable into late August, early September, maybe we lock him down then before he hits he hits that option, in his contract, maybe extend him then. But I need to see at least 2/3 to 3/4 at least of a healthy DeGrom next year. And if he's anywhere near the level that we expect him to be, then I'd want to see him come back. But he's got to prove more or less that he is beyond those injuries at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at a situation where, let's say he is healthy. Let's say he does put together that healthy, a healthy season in terms of, how he gets out, he makes every start. And then maybe we're looking at 2019, 2020 production. You're looking at potentially paying Francisco Lindor, Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer alone, north of 150 million almost. I mean, it'll definitely be interesting, but it's almost a crazy, concept to believe that we as Mets fans, we have the owner to where that doesn't matter. We could pay 3, 4 guys 150, $200 million. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because we have the richest owner in baseball. It's kind of hard to fathom. And I think until we reach that promised land and, get to that championship, win that championship, will it be kind of hard to grasp, but it's the simple truth. So, Dad, you got anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
I mean, we haven't mentioned the fact, we got Cano for 20 or 22 million for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
The good news with that is after next year, that does come off the books. So if we're looking long range with locking up DeGrom, that's $40 million pretty much that will be gone at that point. You won't be paying him any longer than that. One thing to factor in also as far as expenses go, there isn't a salary cap, but there is a luxury tax.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure exactly what the specifics are, but of course, the more you go over that, the more you pay. That's kind of a drop in the bucket for our owner as well. But when you're factoring in millions of dollars, that will be something the Mets will play. The Mets will have to pay. And as their budget, if their budget starts nearing the 275 to 300 million a year type range, that luxury tax could add up to millions of dollars. Let's say 20 million or whatever the case may be. So that's something you'll have to consider as well. But from a positive standpoint, Cano coming off the books in 2 years will be, something to where maybe you can allocate that money towards a DeGrom extension down the road, unless they can buy him out now, or I don't see how they trade him unless they can basically trade him and attach a high-level prospect to it and pay half of his salary so you can save $10 million a year. That's the only way I see that happening. Or they buy him out and he doesn't have to play and he gets half of that money or whatever. But otherwise, you're going to have to pay him. But eventually that is $20 million annually that you will have back in your pocket to allocate to a DeGrom, extension down the road. But, if you're a Met fan, I'll just sum this up. This is a good day. I know we have a tendency to be pessimistic because we've been snake bit so many times with injuries and things of that nature. And there's nothing you can do about that now except look at what you've got and what the possibilities are and just, hope for the best. And right now, you got to be optimistic going into next season. Our owner's giving us exactly all he can do to give us a winning product on the field and compete for a world championship. And that's something we haven't had. And just the fact that as Met fans, we have the joy and excitement of experiencing what we did with Scherzer and last year with Lindor. That's something we didn't have before. So,
Yeah.
eventually we're going to hit it. If it does, for some reason, if Scherzer doesn't work out, this is not the end. There's going to be another elite free agent in years to come, and our owner's not going away for a long time. So at some point in time, we're going to hit it, and at some point in time, we're going to win a world championship. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
So Met fans, be happy and be optimistic for the future.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. It's coming. You don't know when, but it's definitely in sight. I do think that, Cohen, I give him credit. The one thing I was excited about, him buying the team, I was a bit speculative of whether he was going to put his money where his mouth is and really back up some of the comments he had to say in terms of, the 3 to 5 year championship window, the spending money, the money's not an issue. And here he is, not even a year and a half later, 2 years later, and he's putting his money where his mouth is. We really don't know what's to come in terms of who else could come to New York. Obviously, not looking for much in terms of this year outside of, Baez and some mid-level guys. But in the next coming years, you hit it right on the head. This is not it. And, there's going to be a big-time guy that whether it be next year, the year after that, a year after that, they're going to come to New York. And Queens is looking like a place where, these guys are not only going to want to get paid but want to play ball. So with that being said, guys, appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll be back sometime later on this week. Probably we got some Jets. Obviously, we got to touch on some Jets, and who knows? I mean, tomorrow we can wake up. Yeah, Mike White. Those days have unfortunately came and gone. But it was a fun run while it lasted. Zach Wilson struggled last, Sunday. Got the win, but, like to see some things out of him. So we'll be back soon with some more content in terms of the Jets. Knicks and Rangers, Knicks have kind of fell back into there's some speculation with Kemba Walker and, the future with him. And then, the Rangers hitting ice. I want to say, are they playing tonight?
I don't know. They were supposed to play last night against the Islanders, but the game got canceled because of COVID. Several players of the Islanders have either been in contact with someone who has it or they have it. So the fact that they were scheduled to play last night, I doubt if they're playing tonight.
Yeah. So, guys, with that being said, there's a lot going on. We could wake up tomorrow. Javier Baez could be a Met again. So if that's the case, don't be surprised if you see us again tomorrow. Other than that, we'll probably be back in terms of baseball, sometime during this lockout when we get a little bit more information of what's to come, not only with the Mets, but Major League Baseball itself. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back sooner than you know it. We're out.
Let's go Mets.
LFGM.